All right, we are back with another Wrestling Perspective podcast. If you look down, you'll see a few more dates that Lars has left before the end of this leg of the tour. I think you said a couple weeks ago with Brody that you will be doing another one in the fall, right? Lars Frederiksen of Rancid, Old for Casuals, Lars Frederiksen and the Bastards.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go to England first. I think England is August, and I'm going to be doing a tour there, and that's getting worked out right now. We're still kind of working out the fall dates, but yeah. So, I mean, look down below, and if you can make it, let's get you out there.
All right, a little inside baseball. During the Brody King interview, we were talking about West Coast wrestling and the lack of shows going over and whatnot. We hang up off the show. Usually Lars and I talk, and Lars says, hey, for our next guest, I have the great idea because I wanted to tie in a little bit to what we were talking about with Brody King. Let me reach out to my buddy Vinnie and see if he's interested in coming on. And here he is, Vinnie Massaro. Vinnie, thank you so much. This is the Brody's been out for a while now, and we were talking about how Bay Area wrestling doesn't get a lot of respect, but yet all the stars, well, a lot of the stars you're seeing right now, up and comers, are coming out of the Bay Area. And Lars, this was your idea of tying the two interviews together.
Well, for me, like for the last, I don't know, however, couple, decades, I've been going to indie wrestling shows because I actually like that kind of wrestling more than, watching it on TV or seeing the bigger shows, because I really feel like you actually get to connect with the wrestlers. There's a lot more heart and soul there. And Vinny is one of those guys. How long we known each other, Vinny? 20 years?
Yeah, I've been wrestling for 24 years. So yeah, about 20 years, 22 years. Yeah, about that time.
Yeah, I mean, because so knowing Vinny over these years, knowing what he's accomplished, who he trained under, all these things, I wanted to kind of spotlight more of indie wrestling, because I do believe it's a form of wrestling that is often overlooked, because you obviously can't keep storylines and stuff like that. But now in today's world, that's the old school thought. But now in today's world with the internet and Fite TV and IWTV, it's a lot easier to stay sort of informed with indie wrestling companies. West Coast Pro being one of the ones that I'm a huge fan of, and I try to make every show. But I wanted to get Vinny on because I wanted to get his perspective. Because, Dennis, as you know, a lot of the guests that we have on the show are very accomplished, maybe in bigger companies. We don't really, Vinny's obviously been in the business, 3 decades? You know what I mean? And you've probably, locked arms with 1,000 guys that had gotten up there. But I want to get your perspective, because not only are you a trainer and head booker for West Coast Pro, but you also wrestle, and you make these guys characteristically not known for wrestle. And I will say, and it's not just because we're homies, but you can have a great match with a broomstick. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring Vinny on the fucking show. So Dennis, if you want to kick it off with the first question, because I know we've been talking about this, and I know you've been doing your research. So go ahead.
Listen, Vinny, I've been doing my research. You're a guy that popped up in Lucha Underground. I've maybe watched your spot with Sarah Romero 500 times because I thought it was so entertaining with the pizza and the super kick. Hey, go look it up, Vinnie Massaro and Lucha Underground. That stuff was great. I've watched a ton of your interviews. I'm definitely going to touch upon the stereotypes of Italian wrestlers. My mom was a 4'11" Italian woman that just cussed up a storm. And she's from Boston and smokes, so she'd be like, what are you fucking talking about? Oh, my God.
I love her already.
She's dead, so it's okay. But I do want to touch upon your 20-plus years in wrestling. Lars said you locked arms with just about everybody. I've seen a ton of your spots. And are you a guy now at this point in your career where you've settled into saying, hey, listen, I'm comfortable with where I am. I've had some, touches with going up a level, but I'm happy. Are you still, because I know a lot of guys that get frustrated and start getting angry with the business, and then that affects their attitude towards trying to get up. They feel like the industry owes them something after they have 15 plus years in wrestling. Then we see guys in this new age of wrestling where, 4 years YouTube clips, all of a sudden they make it up, but they still can't wrestle their way out of a plastic bag.
Sure. I mean, so obviously, there's everyone wants to be a pro wrestler to be famous. You know what I mean? They all want to be part of, like, they want to get that WrestleMania moment. Like, for myself, though, I was never like that. I always wanted my main goal was to be in Japan. To go wrestle in Japan. That was my main goal. And then once I got older, honestly, the main goal for me was to make a living in professional wrestling. Now, obviously, go to WWE, you're making a living. But for me personally now, I'm making just as much, money, in the indie level, training, and then but listen, by all means, if AEW came, I would love to go wrestle for AEW. I would, ROH, Impact, those are like my, the three, one of the three places I would love to go. ROH, now that it's got with Tony Khan under Impact but the main reason for all those three promotions is because of the matches, and the reason is because I get to wrestle all these great people. Like, I will get to wrestle Lee Moriarty, Daniel Garcia, Bryan Danielson, Samoa Joe, CM Punk, FTR. There's all these great wrestlers out there that I could wrestle. Same thing with Impact. There's a ton of people, Josh Alexander that you can just go at, Rich Swann, Willie Mack that you can go wrestle. But the cool thing now, like Lars was saying, I can do all that in the indie. I mean, last night we had a West Coast show. And now this is a quote-unquote small indie show. We had Yuji Nagata. We had Nora Suzuki, Debbie Malenko, Bandito. I mean, that's a quote-unquote indie show now. 10 years ago, yes, you wanted to go work and get hired because I want to wrestle that guy. I want to wrestle this guy. Because you're now, 10 years ago, you weren't wrestling those kind of people, that you are now. But now the indies are so open. I mean, the very next show we're having at West Coast Pro, I'm wrestling Biff Busick, Timothy Thatcher versus Kevin Blackwood, Tyus Alexander versus Will Ospreay. I mean, that's an indie show. That's literally an indie show that's in your backyard. Like that, we couldn't do that 10 years ago. So the fact that I can wrestle all these great talents and have these amazing matches while being in my home, in my West Coast Pro, in my like an hour away from my house is a blessing. Plus I get to teach. I have a place where I can go teach, and I have students where I can watch them, make sure they're trained right. Because to me, that was one of the issues we were having in the West Coast is, there wasn't a lot of good training out there, and some of the wrestlers were starting to, you can tell it wasn't the way I was trained at, because I was trained in, old school style by Mike Modest at APW. So I'm glad I'm bringing that back. And I mean, that's, like I said, yes, everyone wants to make the dream to have that WrestleMania moment. For me, it was always about making a living in pro wrestling. And now, 20 years later, I want to have those good matches against those great wrestlers.
Well, you mentioned Mike Modest because I think that's probably how I met you, was through Mike Modest, and He trained you. And the one thing that Mike always had, and he always kind of was like a day late and a dollar short, whether it was WCW being a Kevin Sullivan guy, or Donovan Morgan was around at that time, and they were going to Japan quite often, and Bison and all these guys that basically you trained under, Mike Modest being that one. But his importance, I always thought, was about the psychology of the match and telling the story. So with you now training these younger cats, are you sort of making that an important thing as they're working and learning the business?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like you watch wrestling now. Everybody's a good wrestler. There's not too many good workers. You know what I mean? There's plenty of people that can do great moves. It's like, hey, you think you saw this guy do 4 flips? Well, there's a guy in the East Coast that's going to start wrestling next year that can do 5 flips. They can do a 900, whatever. You know what I mean? There's always somebody more that can do something crazy or something different. But at the end of the day, the ones that get the most reaction are the ones that can tell a story in the ring, the ones that have a good structure in the match. The bad word, psychology. But, honestly, that's what I want to teach. I want to teach the right way of doing things. You know what I mean? Like, the best wrestlers that you see that are on TV right now. FTR, CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, Samoa Joe, You know, those guys, you know, Adam Cole, you know, Adam Page, those guys can tell a story. You know what I mean? They make you invested in the match. And that's what I think is the most. Because I mean, sure, there's, like I said, there's gymnastics people everywhere that can do everything, anything, you know, anybody can do, and then some. But to be a wrestler where you can have the story, where you can tell the, you know, the audience, hey, you know, they're invested in something, that's the key to being a good pro wrestler, and longevity, obviously.
The West Coast is known for being years ahead of music and art and TV and celebrities and all that stuff. And then the rest of the world catches up. And then it's old hat for the West Coast. But why do you think it was that the West Coast fell behind in the wrestling scene compared to everywhere else until just recently, now that they're starting to catch up?
I think I think it's just the lack of promotions, because obviously, you know, you go on the East Coast, you can drive 2 hours and you're like in 3 different states, and you can watch so many different promotions. Us, it's kind of like NorCal, SoCal. You know what I mean? That was pretty much the two basics. And unfortunately, while the rest of the country was doing DVDs and, you know, putting their stuff out on YouTube, or, you know, now streaming, West Coast was always behind on that. Until like almost like a year ago, we started streaming shows. I think that was the issue, is we weren't getting enough of our footage out as quickly as you know, as we wanted to. That part, you know, was very lacking. Plus, I think too, you know, a lot of the West Coast wrestlers stayed on the West Coast. They didn't go out, you know, anywhere else, just because it was, you know, it's not as convenient. It's not as you know, it's harder to travel from the West Coast to the other side of the country, you know, for, you know, whatever reason it is. So a lot of people, the problem was like me, I was having great matches at Gym Wars, you know, with like Christopher Daniels and, you know, all these other, you know, Scoot Andrews, all these great wrestlers, but nobody saw them. You know what I mean? Like, nobody's like, oh, everyone's like, oh, Vinny, I've heard you're a good wrestler, but I've never seen your matches because we don't know how to watch it.
Well, the irony is that, you know, we live in Silicon Valley, but yet we're last to the dance. So now that you have like IWTV streaming, you've got obviously an owner who understands the business in some sense, because I don't think he would be that successful, or you guys would be that successful, unless he surrounded himself with people smarter than him, or as smart. You know what I'm saying? It's like I always say, if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room. But now that you're looking at the way people are digesting wrestling, right? Now we have the streaming aspect. The DVD is kind of a thing of the past. The tape trading is a thing of the past. I mean, you can literally go on the internet and find any match from any era, really. There's some that you can't. But my point is that seeing this kind of golden age of wrestling happen, do you think it's that important to leave the indie wrestling circuit now? I mean, because now that you can have eyes on you at all times.
Right. I mean, it's, yeah, like I said before, even if, you know, like let's say I do go end up wrestling for, you know, ROH or Impact or AW, I could still technically do the indies. And it's not before it was like, oh, you know, like, oh, you're signed. You don't diminish yourself. Don't go to the bottom leagues. How can you say that when there's like Minoru Suzuki on a show that you're on? You know what I mean? And if you have, there's people out there like Effie, you know, who go out there and hustle, and they make money. You know, like, you know, me, I myself, you know, I make money wrestling and being a trainer. You know what I mean? Plus, I help other people backstage at multiple shows. You know, not just West Coast. I do other shows. So that's how I hustle, and that's how you can make a good living in professional wrestling in the indie level. You know, there's, you know, people merchandising, there's shirts, you know what I mean? There's, you know, obviously, you know, shows like you guys that, you know, that help out and help spread the word. But there's ways to do it. And the thing is, like, everyone's like, you know, always the, you know, the small leagues and you know, independence is this, but it's not like that anymore. I personally have seen some of the best matches of the year have been on indie shows.
Agreed.
We've talked about how you were trained in the ring, and one of the things Lars and I geek out about when we interview someone who's also a booker is how did you become, or not become, but how did you formulate your booking tendencies? Every booker is different. They're like snowflakes. You'll never see two the same with whether they like hardcore, or they hate blood, or they like comedy, or they hate it. Was there anybody that sat you down to help you with the psychology of booking, or was it just something you picked up?
Honestly, I think it's because, kind of like me and Lars are the same, where we like to go back and watch like older stuff. So I think the thing with me is that I started watching a lot of the older territory stuff, like Roy Shires, and back in the day, and I was just like I would obviously I wasn't, there's not too much stuff to watch, but I would like read about like the stuff that he did with Ray Stevens and Pepper Gomez. And this thing that he would just do the way it was like the territory days where, like he would have his local guys and he would push them so hard and he would go, make them wrestle the other top talents from across the country, where it would basically like, Ray Stevens would wrestle, Nick Bockwinkel, and they'd be like literally, the way they were booked in on the matches and on the cards, you would think Ray Stevens was at the same level as right. Nick Bockwinkel or other wrestlers. So then when Nick Bockwinkel will go back to his hometown or whatever, whichever NWA they got from Florida, whatever, then Ray Stevens would become the top guy. And then if you had like a lower local person, then he would wrestle Ray Stevens. And then that guy would start. So, you know what I mean? And to me, that was like, well, that's the smart way of doing things. You know what I mean? Because you can't just keep flying people in left and, all of a sudden you're like, well, now you're broke. You know what I mean? And plus those guys get signed, like how a few years ago when NXT was signing everybody, everyone was like, the indies are dead. Well, the indies are dead because we didn't spend enough time, pushing their local people. Instead of flying in Johnny Gargano back then and put him in against a local guy, they'll put Johnny Gargano and then another flying. Well, then those guys get signed. Well, then, what are you doing? You know what I mean? It's just like almost, it's kind of weird. Like I almost look at the way like UFC does it too. Because like UFC would have like Brock Lesnar in the main event, but then the opening match was like John Jones. And then people started noticing, oh, John Jones is a good wrestler. And then all of a sudden, 2 years later, John Jones is the top guy. And then the bottom of the guy will be someone, they'll put like Conor McGregor in the opening match. And then they would start pushing, you know what I mean? Things like that. So, I think eventually, like, obviously, trust me, I'm not perfect. Like sometimes I'm like, oh, that did not work out. Let's not do that ever again. But I think the main thing about trying to do booking and helping out is being able to admit that you're wrong. I think that's one of the issues with like, with WWE they have is, Vince McMahon, is the main guy. He's, and everyone's trying, they don't run, I think they don't run a show they don't try to run a show that gets the fans approval. They're trying to run a show that gets the approval of Vince. And I think that's why that's one of the major issues I think that, that the storylines with WWE has, which, I think you got to have more than one person that's number one. And you got to be able to like the person that is booking, hey man, that was bad, and admit it and listen to other people's opinions on it. I think that's one of the issues. One of the major things that you have to do as a booker. You gotta realize you're not perfect.
Well, one of the things I noticed about last night, and I know this is kind of dating, from when we're talking now, but, seeing like a Titus Alexander in there with the speedball, right? Or a Jacob Fatu in there with Bandito, or Kevin Blackwood with Suzuki.
Minoru.
Yeah. So it's like, my question is that you have this homegrown talent, right? These guys, they're obviously winning their matches. How do you feel like it's harder to build a guy in an indie promotion than it is, like, for instance, a bigger promotion where all eyes are on set, you know what I mean? Because they have a weekly program or whatever it is. But do you feel like it's a harder job? I mean, is your pacing, are you looking at it differently as far as the pacing of the match or building the card is what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so. Just because like we can do, like Titus, we've been working on Titus, trying to get him get him up to this level for like about 6 months now. like myself, like, you know, when I first came to West Coast and, you know, last, you know, in August, the first 6 matches, like I lost every single one of them. You know what I mean? And then I started getting the momentum and started going up. Same thing with Titus. You know, the problem with a thing on TV, you know, because fans are like, who is this guy? I don't know who this guy is. And then they just react negatively. And then, like, you know, I think everyone in the back's probably like, oh, let's just cut that out. You know what I mean? It's like it's a lot more, you know, it's a lot more stressful because, like, literally, you know, you have like, hey, let's bring this new guy out. And then if he does bad the first day, you're done. Like, that was a mistake. You know what I mean? Go hide and, you know, whatever. And then reverse, if like you know, if like Roman Reigns, like when they were trying to shove him down our throat that he was a good guy, well, that backfired. Like, no, you know what I mean? Like you had him in the back, you know, try to be the number one guy when it was, you know, organically they wanted to go, you know, behind Daniel Bryan, and then everybody, it was a big cluster. You know what I mean? Like it ended up blowing up in the face. So that part's hard. The problem with booking is you need to tell a story, you know, and to tell a story, you need time. Unfortunately, we have 5 minutes of TV time. Go do it. Well, you know, that's not, it's kind of hard to be, you know, to rush that, or, you know what I mean, and try to do. But I think honestly, like I do like AEW because they're willing to take their time. Like, you know, with the MJF, they're not rushing that. You know what I mean? They could have turned this, turned that. They're taking their time, and, you know, I do like that. But yeah, like I said, I think the problem with the, you know, internet, like, you know, they say, you know, somebody sees something and they don't like it, they'll let you know about it right away, and then people start freaking out and, oh no, what are we doing? And then they start to second guessing themselves. You know, I think if you have a set thing and you're trying to do it and you know it's going to take time, stick with it and go for it.
All right, before we started recording, we were kind of, and this is funny, but we were making a joke, which now is turning into my question about how back in the day, you go to an indie show, you see the Honky Tonk Man or Marty Jannetty in the main event wrestling Jack Off the Clown, who's the owner, the booker, who owns the ring and does all this stuff. And there's 18 matches on the card, and then everybody leaves. You know, it's a money grab.
Tired. Everybody
yeah.
leaves tired.
But now the thinking has changed. The way indie cards are set up, the way they bring and book people are whole different. And it was one of the reasons why I stopped going to indie wrestling. Like, I don't want to go see Marty Jannetty in the main event, who's 72 years old. I don't give a damn about Marty Jannetty. I want to see people wrestle. When did this start changing on the indie scenes? Because I just recently started going back and watching going to indie shows, and it's now great. You're getting, once you said, like you said, Suzuki and Speedball and all these guys that are indie grown talents now main eventing, and a whole card is stacked full of guys who can work. When did this start changing, at least for you?
Oh man, I think when, I want to say like a little bit, started to change a little bit with ECW was around, because ECW was just like, you know, like it was pretty much unknown people for the most part. But the fans wanted to go because those are, you know, this is their, like, it was like their, you know, this is my home team, you know what I mean? I'm supporting my home team. And then I think it really went off when ROH was popular. When ROH started doing it. Obviously King of Indies before that. The King Indies, you know, the tournament that I was part of, you know, that was pretty much what started ROH, or, you know, they got the idea to start ROH. And when ROH was there, it was basically all great wrestling. The main attractions were just the great wrestlers. It wasn't just, hey, here's a big name from the past, let's wheel them out, no pun intended, and let's everyone take a picture. He's gonna do 2 moves because he can't, you know, his hip doesn't move. But I think ROH made it to where it's like, hey, the story is in the ring. They're professional wrestlers, and we're gonna let them be professional wrestlers instead of trying to do this, you know, all these weird things. And I think when ROH started getting really popular, that's when indie wrestling's like, you know what? We don't have to bring in these old guys. Let's bring in the best wrestlers from around the country. Let's showcase good wrestling. Because I mean, back, you know, I remember when I first started, like my matches were like, you know, just 5 minutes, 6 minutes. It was, they were quick, they were just, and it was just nothing. We didn't do anything. But then, once you started, like I said, once like you started being wrestlers and you started getting more into the, fans started getting smarter. So they knew this guy's a good wrestler. They want to see high flyers. They want to see lucha libre. They want to see Japanese style. They wanted to see more of it. And I think that's what made it, that's what the turnaround of the indie wrestling. And then, the indie started blowing up, because of all these great talents that we were having.
One of the things that I mean, every time I've gone to a West Coast show, it seems to be just packed to the rims. Like, every seat is taken. When you think about the promotion aspect of it, and back in the day, you would see flyers on telephone poles, maybe in Hayward or some shit. You know what I mean?
Right. That was me. That was probably me. Roland was making, hey, go out there and here's a roll of tape, here's a stack of posters, go out, hustle. I'm like, all right, cool, thanks.
Being in the business, like, and seeing how the whole promotion side has changed, just because how you have to be more diligent with your social media. You have, you got to depend on word of mouth, and hopefully somebody gets, does this and it gets reposted. And I guess when it comes to a successful indie wrestling company, you want to bring in this talent, right? That might might be a little bit more on the higher end. Are you thinking are the budgets, as far as, because you're not spending so much on the promotional side, as far as, like, let's say flyers, ads in newspapers, these things where maybe people won't really look, is that freeing up any kind of is it freeing up any money to hire these bigger stars? Is that kind of how it's working?
Honestly, thank God I don't have to handle any of that, the budget stuff. That's Scott, Scott Brigante. He's the owner of West Coast, and thank God he handles all the money stuff, because I couldn't handle all that, the flights, and this flight got canceled, we got to do all that. So I'm glad he takes care of all that. But I think the reason why it's so successful is because Scott, he's also a business owner. He has his own business, not just West Coast, because other business, and he knows how to handle a business. And he realizes, like, if you have a small, business, you have to spend money to make money.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think, back in the day, everyone was like, oh, our budget's 1,000, because if we lose our ass, I won't be fine. You know what I mean? It's like, you're owning a small business. You have to take chances. There's going to be times where you're not going to make a lot of money. You're going to lose money, but you know what? You got to make an investment. Like last night, Suzuki, Nagata, Debbie Malenko, Bandito. Obviously, that's a big budget. But like you said, it's now everyone, like, literally we can have a mystery show and it'll sell out. It's an investment. You know what I mean? West Coast Pro, now it's the place to be. It's like you have to go to, just like a PWG show, you have to go to those shows, because even we don't know what's going to happen, it's going to be a good show. And I think that we've invested and put out investments and have good matches where we can do that. And the fans know it. You know what I mean? We're starting to get a following from other places. IWTV, when we're on live streaming, it's got, one of the top numbers. And to, back to my other point, that's how ECW was. ECW could have, Bubbles Mahoney versus, the Blue Meanie. Nobody cared. You know what I mean? Because they knew something was going to happen. You can't miss that show. ROH is the same thing. You got to go to this show because there's, something cool is going to happen. You have to watch this show. And I think we've done that with West Coast. And, I'm glad that we're doing that with our homegrown talent. Because if you look at the show, it's split in half. It's homegrown talent versus, larger stars. And I think, I'm happy about that because, obviously it's, at the end of the day, I want to be able to, when I do retire eventually, I want to be able to be like, oh, those are Vinnie's guys. Those are Vinnie's students, and everyone always says, I want to leave the business better than when I got here. It's like, well, it's nice to tweet it out and get, 20 likes about it. I'm actually going to do it. And so hopefully it gets better. But you know what I mean.
I want to touch on. Listen, I'm half Italian, the other half Irish. I don't really acknowledge the
no,
Irish
we don't
half.
count. We don't count that part.
No, we don't. But it seems like anytime you see an Italian wrestler, he's either a gangster, overweight mob guy. He's doing the side kisses, or he found something off the back of a truck, which I've never actually found anything off the back of the truck, guys.
No comment. You guys are recording. Yeah. I don't want to say anything.
Yeah, well, good.
Well, obviously Dennis hasn't been hanging out with the right people.
That's the Irish part. We don't talk about that
part. I got lots of potatoes, guys. Lots of potatoes. Bailey's. But no. So how? Because I know that there's the wife beater and all that stuff, and sometimes it's tough because when you're Italian, that's who you are. I'm sure if I went to your house right now, you'd have a ton of wife beaters and a ton of tracksuits because that's what you wear, right?
Okay, so because everyone always says this, everyone's like, man, I can't believe you did this thing at Lucha Underground where you had like a wife beater and a tracksuit. Okay, this is 100% the shoot. This is 100% real. When I got there to Lucha Underground and they were doing this vignette with me, they're like, hey, we have some like, some pants and a shirt, and it was like a whatever, and it's like, do you like it? And I was like, not really. It's like what would you? And they're like, what would you wear? And I was like, as a matter of fact, I have something, and it's literally the wife beater and the velour suit. That's mine. I brought that from home. That's not like from wardrobe, in the back of the Lucha Underground, that's my shit. So everyone says, I can't believe they made you put that on. I was like, bro, I was wearing that. I walked in wearing that, and they're like, whoa, that looks good. You know what I mean? So that's who I am. Like, the thing that I don't like is when, you can do, stereotypes. I mean, obviously if it's not, insensitive or whatever, we don't want to do anything like that. But as long as you take it seriously, you know what I mean? Like, to me, it was, it's like, hey, I'm Italian. Guess what? My real name is Vincenzo. And I wrestle as Vinnie, and I'm Italian. It's not a far stretch. You know what I mean? Like, Mike Modest always told me, goes, your best gimmick is who you really are, times 100. You know what I mean? So that's who I am. I obviously, as you can tell, I talk with my hands because I'm Italian. So when I wrestle, I talk, I do this a lot. So, as long as it's like, yes, that's who you are, do it. But it's when it's not taken seriously. You know what I mean? Like the whole thing with Santino Marella when he was like, I'm Italian, so I'm a complete idiot. Like, I don't understand what that means. Like, I don't get that. Like, why are Italians idiots now? You know what I mean? Like, so, obviously it's, yes, I'm sure some people would get offended, but I'm 100% Italian. This is the way I eat pizza a lot. Sorry, and I'm not, it's not, it's a big shocker. So as long as it's not offensive to anybody, you know what I mean? Because obviously we don't want to do anything like that. And and you have to be Italian. Like, don't like, oh, I'm Italian, but you're not really Italian. You know what I mean? I think you should be, part of whatever ethnicity that you're trying to do on, it's not like the old days in the 70s when, we had, everybody was a Native American, but nobody was Native American. They just put on the feathers because they had a dark tan. They're like, oh, let's put the feathers on you. You're chiefs, whatever. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. I think you have to be part of that, whatever like I said, whatever you are times 100. But as long as you're being taken seriously, like, UFC, like, you go to Japan, Pride, those guys will come out, and just, have this crazy wardrobe. But when they got in the ring, they got in the ring. You know what I mean? They were wrestling. You know what I mean? The thing that I don't like is when it's like, oh, well, you're Italian, so you're gonna do this, so you're gonna go and hit them with the tire iron or whatever. I was like, well, I get it. That's part of it. And obviously Lucha Underground was a little bit more, fantasy type. So we had the whole pizza thing. But as long as once you get in the ring, we're all wrestlers. You know what I mean? As long as you do, you're still a wrestler afterwards. I don't see any issues with, wearing a wife beater or, doing a thing. Cause obviously, when I remember, I will leave out any names, but I remember seeing my uncles, get into some, some things back home in North Beach, where they had to go and beat, rough up some people, and they all wore their wife beaters. You know what I mean? That was their all. You know what I mean? So but they were badasses. It's not like it's. I think as long as you're taken seriously in the ring, when the bell rings, you're a pro wrestler, and I think as long as you do that, I don't see any issues with any of the other things like that. What do you think, Lars?
Well, I think Dennis really wants to say something because he's looking there like he's got to either pee or ask a question.
I do. It's actually a follow-up to being pigeonholed into that look. Is it hard for you finding ways to develop or grow your character when you're kind of pigeonholed into the wife beater, pizza, Italian gimmick in wrestling?
No, I don't think so. Because I think honestly, once you get old, like I mean, maybe when I first started, I just wanted to be like serious wrestler. Last name, first name, last name, serious wrestler. But then once you get older, you realize that the best thing you could ever do in pro wrestling is stand out. And and if that means, hey, I like that one guy because he's Italian and he does this all the time, I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? I'm perfectly okay with that because they remember who I am, and they'll come back.
Last night, like he's walking back, fans bringing him gifts, and there's pizzas, there's gnocchi, there's all kinds of these things. But the thing I think with Vinnie, and I hope you don't mind me interrupting, Vinnie, but like there's a sense of humor that comes with it. Yes, when he hits the ring, he's all business, and then he can have a fucking incredible match with just about anybody, actually anybody, right? But then there's also this humor thing, whether it's with, he comes out with a Juventus thing on his tights. It's like, if you're Italian, you would know what Juventus was, or a football fan. So there's also these other connections that are being made. And I think that's what is all. It's not just the wife beater guy or the, hey, or coming out with, pizza pie, that's amore, that's his theme music. It's just, I think there's so many other connections, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Vinnie, because you've done the panda gimmick too, which I think is incredible. So it's kind of are you done, Dennis?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you done? Are you done, Dennis?
Are you done?
Time out.
Yeah, my turn. Okay. So, how do you see the number one, the progression of West Coast wrestling, and number two, like, do you ever feel like you can dabble into that panda gimmick and bring that there? Because it is a kind of a humoristic thing. Is that even a word? But you bring the humor into pro wrestling, which I think is definitely needs to be a part of it at times. I don't think it needs to be a 100% show of that. But I mean, where do you see West Coast Pro going? Because you have the basic fundamentals of wrestling. You got great wrestling. But do you think we'll ever see a cage match or a death match or tag team champions or these things? I mean, is it still a work in progress? Do you feel like you can bring that comedic value to that kind of place?
I mean, as part of the West Coast part, I think, obviously we're doing the West Coast Cup, which is a tournament in August, so that's going to be a big deal. I think honestly, eventually we're probably going to do bigger shows, do not pay-per-views per se, but maybe every quarter we'll go to a bigger venue and do these big massive shows, bigger shows than what we're doing now. And then who knows, maybe we'll do a death match. I do death matches, when I wrestle other places, I've done death matches, so we'll figure that out. But I think right now for West Coast, I think we definitely still want to build our younger talent. That's the number one thing. Like Titus, we want to build Titus. We want to bring Charlie, Levi Shapiro. We want to make sure those guys come up, and then all the students that come out of the school, we want to make sure they have a place to go. But I think if in the long run, my vision is like West Coast, we have a bigger building, we run bigger shows. We maybe, who knows, maybe we do an pay-per-view. We do things like that. With the Panda, I think the Panda is more, because comedy, everyone says, oh, I could do comedy. Not everybody can do comedy. it's very hard to do comedy. It's it's because it's like everyone says if it takes two people to have a good match. Comedy, it's like if one person's bad, you're screwed. Like if the other person doesn't do it, it's terrible. It's the worst ever. So that's why I think because the Panda gimmick, I mainly do it at a Lucha Libre, a Pro Wrestling Revolution, and that's I think Lucha Libre fans are more accepting of the comedy wrestling. I don't think I don't think the Panda will work at West Coast because they're so they're so I don't know. Maybe one day we'll bring in Toro Yano and the Panda can wrestle Toro Yano. Maybe that will work out, or or Orange Cassidy can come in. But it's got to be the right place first of all, and you got to have the right wrestler against to do in order to do comedy. I like doing the comedy just because it's it's like I've always said I wanted to be a good wrestler. I wanted to wrestle everything. So that's why I learned Lucha Libre style. That's why I do comedy. That's why I do death matches. That's why I wrestle, a lot of Japanese, wrestlers, because I want to be everything. I want to be able to grapple. I want to be able to do every kind of possible match style there is. And, I wanted to do comedy, and it's working out. So it's working out for sure. And then, 10 years from now, when I'm the guy getting wheeled out, I can just put on the Panda and just dance and make money.
Now, this is a Lars Frederiksen question that I'm going to hijack and steal. And for all of our fans that are watching, they're like, oh, I want to check out some more of this Vinnie and some of the stuff he's done. Are there moments, matches that stick out in your mind that you go, if you want to check me out, go Google this stuff?
So obviously there's the Lucha Underground stuff, you can watch, and that's the more mainstream stuff. But I think personally for me, it's the King of Indies when I wrestled Loki. Obviously, that was one of my my first matches that I wrestled where I was like, okay, this is like I felt like I was on the top part of indie wrestling. Obviously for myself, just when I got to be in the ring with Masawa. That was insane, and it was a great experience for over Pro Wrestling Iron. It was Ogawa and Masawa versus myself and Doug Williams. Which is just sometimes I think about all the wrestlers that I've been in the ring with. I've shared a ring with Masawa, Ogawa. I've shared a ring with Akiyama, Ultimo Dragon, Ishii. If you guys, I'm really proud about the match I had with Ishii. You can go check that out at Indie Wrestling. The streaming and it's a West Coast show. I'm really proud about that match. My match with Daniel Garcia, AEW star. This was before he was a sports entertainer. This was when he was a pro wrestler, and we had a match at a West Coast Pro.
I was there.
Yeah, that was a very happy. That was a very good match. I was very happy with that match. But I mean, yeah, just there's a lot of smaller stuff. Like I said before, I wish there was more of my stuff from APW Gym Wars when I wrestled Chris Daniels and stuff like that where you can watch, but unfortunately there isn't. There's a few stuff like I wrestled Thatcher, when Thatcher was just, starting out at APW at the Gym Wars, but yeah, I think those are my favorite matches, like the ones that I mentioned.
Where do you go from here, Vinny? I mean, it's like you're able to kind of make this good living, doing the training, the wrestling. I mean, where's the development of the character coming from? Like, what is next to unfold? I mean, you have to be thinking about that all the time. I mean, and just because now I feel like you finally have, I mean, other than the Lucha Underground, I feel like you have now a platform in which to kind of do that. And I know that you position yourself in the middle of the card, kind of close to the beginning. And I think that's very respectful. And you make guys look like $1 million. And honestly, like that match with Daniel Garcia, when he went on to AEW, that whatever it was, after Soren had seen that match, because he was there with me that night, he said, wait, that's the guy that wrestled Vinnie Massaro, right? So it's like you're making this impact even on the kids. And now he's taking that match and now seeing him in a different way, even though he's on TV. But like, where do you go from here? How do you develop this character that you have? Is there any ambitions?
Yeah, honestly, I do. Like I said before, I want to be able to wrestle some of the best. I still want to. I'm a pro wrestler. I love professional wrestling, and I want to wrestle. good professional wrestlers. So, you know, I know, like I said, I think I tweeted this up earlier. I think my top 3 goals right now that I have left is, you know, go to Japan again, you know, wrestle for Impact or wrestle for ROH. Just because those are the places where the top 3 places where I think the best wrestlers are at right now. You know, obviously, you know, ROH now with AEW, you know, it's a, you know, you can cross platform, but I think ROH, you know, will have more of the in-ring, you know, matches kind of style. And Impact has a lot of great wrestlers, you know, and you know, I know everyone's like, oh, well, Impact is just that one. No, it's, if you don't watch Impact recently, you're missing out. There's so many good wrestlers. You know, there's so many good wrestlers on right now, you know, that everyone just, you know, you'd be surprised. It's, you know, it's one of the better shows. And then obviously Japan, just because, you know, Noah, you know, Dragon Gate, All Japan, New Japan, even New Japan Strong has some of the best talent. And that, to me, that's what I want. I just want to keep wrestling, having great matches against great wrestlers, because, you know, obviously you know, it's 24 years going on 25 years. I don't know how much longer I can do this. So I want to be able to, you know, go out, you know, the last thing, just keep going. I go as far as I can and wrestle. And then obviously my other thing is helping promote, helping book, helping, you know, elevate the territory, West Coast Pro, and just the West Coast in general. Just keep training kids and keep making sure that they're the new Vinnie Massaros and, you know, the new Titus Alexanders, and getting those guys up there. So, you know, you can interview them in 5-10 years, you know what I mean? And then you can talk about how they're doing at the West Coast, and hopefully they get signed, and, you know, and they go out and do bigger things.
If Lars is still doing this with me in 5 or 10 years, there's something wrong in his life.
No, no.
Lars loves wrestling. Listen, he was going to indie shows back in the day, and I was just like, he was like front row. He wasn't like, you know, oh, I'm just gonna go in the corner because I don't want to get noticed. He was like this, like, you know, making, like, everyone knew it was like, everyone's like, oh, Lars, like, he didn't care. He loves wrestling, so he's gonna be doing this until he has no voice. He's gonna be doing this forever.
That's a very accurate statement. Well, but honestly, I want to just touch it when you got, you know, the connection that we have, you know, in you know, just you as a performer and then outside the ring, and then just knowing half the guys on that card last night, you know what I mean? Seeing Levi come back, you know, and Levi is a great talent, and Titus, I mean, that kid is gold. He is gold. He's got it. And it's like just being able to see that on this level and like have it, because pretty soon it's no longer going to be that level. You know what I mean? You can kind of see him. He's going to take that next step.
He's going to go up there. Yeah, he's Titus, you know, because Titus was trained by his dad. You know, he's my former partner, the Big Ugly. But in the last year, Titus has been coming, you know, to West Coast to train with me, and I've helped him not on moves, because he knows how to do moves. It's the extra stuff, the structure of the matches, and making sure he can tell a story and emphasize everything. And I think he's getting it. You know, I mean, and then the other thing is too, is like, hey, put Titus with Speedball. Why? Because it's going to be a good match? Sure. But he's going to learn so much.
Oh, yeah.
Wrestling Speedball. That's going to be, you know, that's almost like he's having a seminar just by wrestling him. You know, and like, yeah, next match, Titus is wrestling Will Ospreay. He's going to learn so much from wrestling Will Ospreay. And that's what I want, you know what I mean? It's like, sure, I could be like, oh, I'm wrestling Will Ospreay. It's going to be a shit match because there's no way I can keep up with that guy, but I want that marquee. No, Titus with Will Ospreay. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then,
that makes the best sense too, because I mean, you know, and especially for a student, because like what you were saying, the lineage, Mike Modest to you, from Vinnie Massaro, Mike Modest, Big Ugly, to this, no wonder he's the total package. And then giving them these opportunities to get in there with a Speedball, he's on a different level, that kid. I mean, straight up different level.
Let me have just 2 seconds. Speedball is one of like the greatest wrestlers that I've ever talked to, been in the ring with, just because of his mind. Like the way he talks about wrestling is not like anybody else. You know, the way he speaks of it as like as a scholar. like as like he's like he can teach pro wrestling like at the college level. Like he can be, oh, we have a special, a doctorate in pro wrestling speedball. You know what I mean? Like he's that good. And just by me talking to him backstage has made me better as a professional wrestler, and 24 years later, I'm still learning. There's things that I'm always learning about it. And just like we had a seminar here on Thursday, and then even Friday yesterday during the show, me and Speedball were talking backstage, and I learned just so much from the way he describes pro wrestling and the way he talks about pro wrestling. And honestly, like, I hope Speedball is a millionaire one day because he's honestly one of the best wrestlers out there.
100%.
All right, Lars, if you have anything else, go ahead, because we're about to play the greatest game in all of wrestling podcast history. It's What is Vinnie Massaro watching? Now, Vinnie.
Oh, geez.
Yes, here's the game. Lars and I will try to guess what you're currently right now watching, whether it's an old show or a new show, but you have to currently watch it. Binging it, whatever you do, you hand out the points anywhere from a half a point to our whole point. 3 rounds. If we're tied, we go to a tiebreaker 4th round. Lars is winning all-time series 5-2, which I'm coming off a stunning victory over him against the last interview we did. By the way, that was a great one. Go check out Brody King. Lars, you lost. You go first.
I think Vinny's watching Tokyo Vice.
0 points. This is gonna be a horrible game. I can tell you right now.
Why is that? Because you don't watch fucking TV?
I don't watch TV.
Do you watch any kind of TV?
I watch wrestling and sports. That's literally all I watch.
Well, hang on. I'm sure your wife makes you, or girlfriend or fiance or partner makes you watch stuff.
Hey, calm down. Hey, take it easy. All right, calm down. How many do I have? What's going on?
I'm going to guess first 48.
0.
Well, I mean, we can't really pick sports shows, can we?
Or wrestling,
Or wrestling, yeah. He's got to watch The Simpsons.
0.
Oh my God.
So I do. Okay, so you're close, but you are close. So I do watch an animated show.
Oh wait, that's a good one. Well, no hints. How about Pinky Blinders?
0.
Okay.
All right, then you watch Family Guy.
0.
Whoa.
You're getting closer though.
Rick and Morty.
Oh, come on. 0. What are you talking about, Rick and Morty over here?
Jesus Christ. Bob's Burgers.
Yes.
Oh!
You win. That was like 18 rounds we just played.
Bob's Burgers is literally on like every day. Like we're like, we need some noise or something. I'm cooking, we're cooking, we're eating. Just put Bob's Burgers on. It's always on the TV. Literally, like it's literally show. Except for Teddy episodes. I hate Teddy episodes. Teddy's the worst.
Well,
you guys don't watch the show. It's you'll know later.
I won, so it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah, Lars won. He's so good at it. I watch Bob's Burgers. I watch wrestling, and I watch the Warriors. I watch baseball, and then that's pretty much that's all. And then that's it. That's all. Then I have no time. Then I try to sleep, but that doesn't happen so much.
Fair enough.
Well, Vinny, don't come back on again. That would hurt my heart, my soul. No, I'll go watch Peaky Blinders and first 48. I don't know. I just figured if you're in a relationship, she was going to make you watch some sort of stupid crime drama stuff. And that was the first one that it seems like everybody's forced to watch.
Listen, I bought her a Kindle thing or like an iPad and she just, it's in the corner. I'm like, go ahead, babe. I'm watching Steph Curry's on. I have enjoy. Put the headphones on. I don't want to watch that stuff.
This guy's genius. Wow.
Yeah, that's fair.
Where can people find you?
Well, I guess the easiest thing would be on Twitter at Snoring Elbow, named after my finishing move. It's a long story, but maybe next time I'll explain it. But yeah, West Coast Pro. Once a month we do shows. Please watch us on IHeartRadio. Pro Wrestling Revolution is the other promotion that I wrestle for. If you want to come check that out. And then if anybody wants, looking for training, and we have a school in Pacifica, California. Like I said, you can go hit up West Coast Pro. It's West Coast Pro Wrestling at gmail.com, or you can find me on Twitter. Like I said, I write hilarious tweets. I have no filter because I'm old and whatever. Everybody hates me anyway, so might as well join the club. It doesn't matter.
I hate you.
Thank you. That's the Irish part. That's the Irish part that hates me. That's why.
Lars, quickly, where can people find you? Tour dates are on the bottom, so we all know that.
You can find me, Lars Frederiksen. Anything with a blue check is me. I'll be on tour. I'll be in Chicago. Probably already just was in Chicago at the point this time. Is this actually no? The night that it airs, I will be in Chicago. So tonight I will be in Chicago, and you'll see me around the world whenever you buy a ticket or go to an indie. Well, yeah, basically go to an indie show or maybe at the supermarket.
Well, I want to close this out by saying thank you to all the fans who download, subscribe, and all that stuff. Without you guys, it'd just be two old guys talking to people that have no interest, at least me.
Three old guys.
Most of us, yes. So thank you, everybody. I know Lars and I, we are always excited when we see the tweets of people who enjoy the interviews or the Instagram messages. So I do want to take a second to say thank you. Wrestling Perspective, Fite TV, go check them out there. Subscribe YouTube, anywhere you get audio podcasts, we give them away. Go check them out. Rate, subscribe, tell your friends. For everybody at home, the show is over. We'll say our goodbyes off the air. Lars Frederiksen, Dennis Farrell. Lars, say goodbye to your friend.
Vinnie Massaro, the man, the myth, the legend. Forget about it.
Forget about it. I'll see you next month, huh?
All right, brother. See you next month.